Hello, my name is Paul Quinney, and this is the Flames Faceoff, brought to you by the Hockey Writers. Now, this is a weekly show where we bring together some of the best writers we have in the Calgary Flames writing pool, and we discuss all things Flames. Now, to make sure you don't miss an episode of this, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel. Just hit that little red button on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, like this video on YouTube and Facebook, and share it with your fellow Calgary Flames fans and friends. And be sure to check out some of the great hockey content that we have here at thehockeywriters.com. So with that, let's get going. I'd like to introduce the panel. We have with us Mr. Colton Pankiw. Colton, welcome. How are you doing?
Hey, Paul. I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Great. And Brett Krauss. Brett, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Always good to be here.
Yeah, I love seeing those Calgary Flames sweaters behind you. I'm
Yep.
Still surprised nobody hasn't broken into your house. You better keep your address secret.
Keep the blinds closed.
Yeah, and none other than Mr. Greg Tysowski. Greg, welcome. How are you?
Actually, to be honest, not great because my tea time was canceled yesterday. I had another tea time booked for today, but it's snowing again. And then I find out with the protocols for COVID-19, golfing in Alberta, you have to golf with members of your household. And I don't know about you guys, but the reason I golf is to get away from people in my household. Because the golfing season's been a disaster. So right. I'm not happy. Not good.
We better censor that last bit. Keep you safe. Yeah. Don't want to see anything happen to you.
They know.
So let's talk about the week that was. We only had one game this week. Well, actually, the Senators go tonight, Sunday night, but all we've seen is 4-0 loss to the Winnipeg Jets, and God bless the Montreal Canadiens. I have to say they are working very, very hard to keep the Flames' playoff hopes alive. Probably harder than the Flames are trying to get into the playoffs, unfortunately. But what was your take on that loss? 4-0. Sutter, he was asked about it, and he said, "Well, it was a story of turnovers." Colton, what are your thoughts on Wednesday night?
Yeah, it was just they really had nothing going at any point. It was kind of I don't even know. I'd like to say just one of those games that you just forget about. But again, we've talked about it. It's kind of just the story of this season. It was just nothing was going right. There was nothing offensively, and yeah, it just kind of sums up this season.
Yeah. Brett, what are you thinking? Did you see anything that was out of the ordinary Wednesday night? Turnovers?
Yeah, I don't think so. It was just kind of a snooze fest if you're a Flames fan, you know. Markstrom didn't play great. I think only 19 shots he faced, and he let in 4. So yeah, it was just kind of another dud from the team. And although they did outshoot them, I think they had 30 some shots. But it's kind of the story of the season. Couldn't generate offense when they don't get the goaltending. So it's just, I mean, they're still not mathematically eliminated, but they're just that much closer now.
Yeah. Greg, any thoughts on Wednesday night? Sure, it was lack of offense, that was for sure, but
I was actually writing about it because I'm writing my Flames weekly column that's going to be released tomorrow, and I was thinking about that game, and it's kind of, they've actually been doing overall a pretty good job over the last month playing this Sutter style of hockey. Like they're reducing chances, like even only giving them 19 shots, and they're actually playing better within the Sutter system. But I agree, they're having trouble getting goals. But some of these, all the goals, Sutter said we had primary assists on these goals, and he's right. And I think a lot of it has to do is the Flames they're still trying. They're still in the playoff hunt. So they have to run the table. And I think the kind of the emotional toll and just the mental toll of trying to win every game down the stretch, I think you just, once in a while, you lose your focus. And I think this is kind of a big letdown game that they were never really in it. Maybe their head wasn't in it. And I don't blame them because it just seems like the season is just dragging on and on. It's a 56 game season, but it feels like it's one of the longest seasons in record. It just never seems to resolve itself. And this is why I was actually kind of rooting for Montreal to hang on. They were up 2-0 last night. I said, if they could just get a point, get it to overtime, and then it's over. And then we can start talking about next year and maybe the young guys coming in. But now it's still, as long as the Flames have a chance, they're going to keep playing Markstrom. They're going to keep on, trying to win every game down the stretch. And it's not going to happen. So I'm just kind of, let's go already. Let's turn the page on this season.
I mean, you and Brett raised it, the possibility of the Flames in the playoffs. So I can't really let that drop. I think it's conceivable. The real challenge will be the Senators tonight. They're the hottest team in the North Division, and the Flames just haven't been able to solve them. But assuming they could get by the Senators, I think it could be conceivable. They could take all 4 games with the Canucks. Just for giggles, let's do a poll here. Colton, what do you think? 5 in a row here and a spot in the playoffs or not?
No, I think it's like Greg said. I think it would almost be better if it could just, the sooner it's over. It's kind of almost like holding on to false hope for Flames fans. It kind of, you almost just wish it would end, because it's going to at some point. They haven't showed me anything that can prove that they could win 5 straight here. And I think the Habs are going to pick up at least 1 point in these 5 games. I don't think they're going to just lose the remaining 5. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah. Brett, what do you say?
Yeah, I'm same boat here. I think all Montreal needs is a point. So their skaters can play an absolute dud, but if Carey Price, gets them to overtime, then it's over for the Flames. Plus, the Flames have to win all 5 games just to tie Montreal, and I'm not sure if they have tiebreaker. So
I think they do, actually,
yeah. So they have the tiebreaker, but I think it's just going to be, it's too much of a Hail Mary. Everything has to go according to plan and exact way. So I think it's just, false hope for fans.
Greg, I know what you're going to say. You're on record.
Yeah. Well, it's right now the Flames are looking up at Ottawa in the standings. Ottawa has more points than Calgary now. And so Ottawa is probably favored. Even if you're like a sports select guy, if you're kind of like a betting guy, you would probably bet on Ottawa to win this game, because they've owned the Flames all year long. There's no reason to think the Flames can reverse that. But if they do somehow win this game, and Montreal, they have less games than Calgary. I think they have 2 less games than we do now. So, then they have these 4 against Vancouver, and Vancouver's not eliminated either at this point. And if Vancouver can win a couple of games before they play Calgary, then the games will mean everything. And but if even one of them beats the other one once, like going 3-1 against Vancouver isn't good enough. They got to go 4-0. So I think the Flames and the Canucks should kind of do a little side deal, because that game 1 of that 4, if game 1 matters for the playoffs still, they should do a little handshake deal. Whoever wins that first game, they should the other team will agree to just tank the next 3 and allow them to win, because going 2-2 or 3-1 doesn't matter. You got to win all 4. So I know they won't do it, but I think that would be interesting if they could make a little handshake deal and win the first one. You win all 4.
We're gonna have to talk to our legal counsel, make sure we haven't jeopardized ourselves here with talking.
It's just an idea. I'm just throwing it out there. So.
Yeah. Well, speaking of legal problems, let's switch gears here and talk about what everybody's been talking about this week in the NHL, and that is the incident Monday night involving Tom Wilson of the Washington Capitals. It was a game, of course. I'll just recap it. I think most people have seen video of what happened, but there was a scrum, as I saw it, in front of the Washington net, and Pavel Vučković was down on the ice, and I guess it's hard to describe what Wilson did, but he's on top of him and gave him a couple of rabbit punches to the back of the head, maybe to the shoulders. At that point, Strome got on top of Wilson, tried to pull him off, Wilson and Strome went at it. Wilson, of course, got the better of Strome, at which point then Artemi Panarov jumped on Wilson's back, trying to pull him off Strome, and Strome threw him around like a rag doll, threw him to the ice. At that point, he was helmetless and could have hurt him seriously with his head injury. What happened? I guess Wilson got a double minor roughing on Panarin, a 10-minute misconduct. Panarin got a roughing call for jumping on Wilson's back. And then the next day, the league imposes a $5,000 fine, the maximum allowed by the collective bargaining agreement on Wilson and they were quite pointed about this, not for anything that he did to Panarin, but for what he did to Buszkiewicz. Anyway, that's the long and the short of what happened. Very controversial, a lot of discussion around the league about what should have happened. Question then to you guys, given what you saw, should Wilson have been suspended? Colton, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think I have kind of mixed feelings on it. I do think I think it got more attention than it normally would have, given the fact that it's Tom Wilson, and he's probably, if not the most hated player in the league, he's definitely up there. He's got a lengthy history with supplemental discipline. So I think the problem that I have with I didn't think it was as bad as maybe some did, but the problem I do have with it is I think it sets a thing going forward with the scrums that a player like him could grab say if they're playing the Flames, a Gaudreau, and kind of ragdoll him like that. And then you can't suspend him because they didn't suspend Tom Wilson, who, if anyone deserves a suspension, it's him. So I think they kind of put themselves in a tricky situation there. I thought giving him a couple games would have just kind of made things easier, whether or not you truly believe he deserves it. So I think they've put themselves in a bit of a tough spot here.
Yeah. Brett, what's your take on it? Should he have been suspended, or is this an overreaction by the fans?
No, I think like for me, a couple games I think would have been good. I'm not sure how much it changes Tom Wilson's game because he is like a repeat offender. But I think Colton's right in that, you know, if somebody else were to ragdoll Johnny Gaudreau around, then it's the NHL's put themselves in a spot of, well, do we just fine this guy $5,000 for just, you know, ragdolling Johnny around? And it's not like had they, you know, suspended Tom Wilson, you know, a dangerous play on a McDavid or a Gaudreau turns into, you know, a suspension worthy. Yeah, I think it's just you gotta they have to stay consistent, which I think is a lot of what I've been reading is the uproar is that yes, it's Tom Wilson, he's a repeat offender, but it's the fact that they're just so inconsistent with what they decide on, you know, who's getting suspended and whatnot. Because, you know, the very next day you saw, I think it was Shane Gostisbehere in Philadelphia get two games. And he just kind of caught a guy with a bit of a cross check and sent him off balance into the boards. And so it's kind of like just in my opinion, the Tom Wilson play is a bit more dangerous because you have guys laying on the ice and skates flying around. So it's just, you know, where's the consistency from the league?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned, both you and Colton mentioned Wilson being a repeat offender. I looked up the stats and he's been suspended 28 games over his career, paid $1.3 million in fines. And I guess he was suspended earlier this year, 7 games for a cross check to the head of Boston's defenseman, Brandon Carlo. So yeah, he's one of a kind. Greg, given all of that, what are your thoughts? If you'd been in charge of league discipline, would he have been suspended here?
Yeah, I think I would have. Like, there's lots of scrums where all kind of crazy stuff happens and people aren't suspended. But I think the fact that Perrin was hurt on the play and he's done for the year. But I was kind of monitoring some of the Twitter responses from other NHLers and former NHLers, and I saw something from former enforcer John Scott. He said it sets a bad precedent where you can just, take on a small skilled player and just ragdoll him and hurt him and, hurt him. He's done for the year now. So it's like John Scott said, it sets a bad precedent where you can get away with that with only a $5,000 fine. And I kind of tend to agree with that. And the response that happened the next game, like no one's mentioned that crazy, game that followed between Washington and New York, where they had 6 fights in the first 8 minutes of that game. It was madness. I actually watched that game on NHL Game Center, and it was just wild what happened there. And the NHL doesn't want to see that. That's kind of a black eye on the league when they see this free for all happening. So, and that could have been completely diffused with a little 2-game suspension. I don't think any of that happens if Tom Wilson's not playing that game, if he's been suspended. So, there's people coming out on both sides of this saying it's it's not really a suspendable offense. These kind of scrums happen all the time. But I just think in this particular case, with his history, they just should have given him 2 games. And this story really blows over probably overnight. But because it just kept on going and going. There was the big $250,000 fine to the New York Rangers for their statement, saying that George Parros should be fired, as league disciplinarian. It's just that the story had legs because the NHL wouldn't just give Wilson a 2-game suspension. That would have just closed the book on it, if you ask me.
Yeah. Well, let me ask this of you three. I heard one commentator say, look, I don't like it. I think he should have been suspended, but I'm not going to get upset about it or waste any airtime on this because we haven't heard a peep from anyone in the NHL Players Association other than a couple of Rangers. And, the biggest threat to players is being injured by other players. And yet here you have Tom Wilson, who many regard as a predator. He's got a track record, as we've talked about it. And the NHL Players Association, which is essentially a union, has not come out and taken a position on it. And, the question is, well, what labor union worth its salt allows its members to injure other members of the union? I don't know what the NHL Players Association can do about this, but I was struck by the silence. Colton, any thoughts on that? I mean, if the players don't care about it, then why should we?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I never really thought much about it. I think kind of one of the things about it that I thought was I kind of got the impression, and I mean, obviously, their GM got fired, Jeff Gordon, shortly after. I think that statement kind of almost turned it around on the Rangers as much as anything. I think a lot of people kind of thought it was just so unprecedented. We've never seen anything like that before. So I think that kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. And then, I mean, like I said, you heard Jeff Gordon got fired apparently for not siding with it. So I don't know. I think it's tough too, because obviously Tom Wilson's a player in that as well. Some of these guys have off-ice relationships with each other. So it's a tricky situation. I'm not surprised they didn't get involved. But I do think, like we've said, just the fact it's not just any player he injured, it's Artemi Panarin. So I think it's just on the league to step in. They really it's a league that doesn't do a very good job of protecting its superstars like you've seen other ones such as the NBA. So I think it's just on the league here that they really dropped the ball.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Brett, any thoughts on that? Was the outcry due to the fact that it was 2 superstars in the league, 2 highly skilled players? I mean, what if it had been a pair of nondescripts? Do you think we would have seen the outcry for the demands for a suspension?
Yeah, I think it definitely fuel on the fire that it's Panarin and Buchnevich, but I still think if you're ragdolling a Zach Cassian type around and it's a dangerous play, people are still they're gonna have strong opinions about it. I think it definitely accelerates the conversation, being that it's stars that were ended up not playing the rest of the season. But I think the severity of the play, no matter really who it is, I think there'd still be a conversation about it, especially since he's a repeat offender as well.
Yeah.
And I think too, we didn't hear anything from the NHLPA, because I did read that apparently Tom Wilson is the Capitals player rep for the
Okay.
NHLPA. So there's probably, yeah, they, like Colton said, probably some off-ice relationships there. So I think that's probably why we didn't see anything.
There's some politics to it.
Yeah.
So that actually, you raise an interesting, well, you raise Cassian there, Brett. Greg, I've heard that, Kevin Bieksa and Matt Stajan said, look, the problem here is that the Rangers built a weak team. They need a nuclear missile in a silo to deal with guys like Tom Wilson. Wilson took liberties, and that's something he doesn't do when he's up against the Vegas Golden Knights. Is that the problem? That the Rangers they've got a soft team? Is that
I was reading a lot of stuff saying that a lot of the optics were bad because it was a big guy, like one of the league's heavyweights and tough guys, just taking on a small guy. And they said if he had kind of hurt a guy who was a big guy like himself, maybe people wouldn't even be, making a big stink out of this. So I think there's something to that. And I was thinking about, if we were talking about if Goudreau got ragdolled, like Lucic is probably one of the biggest deterrents there is in the league. He's still probably, I don't know if anyone could beat him in a fight, so I don't think that it would be a problem for the Flames as long as Lucic is on our team. And I think that is a valid point. Like teams that have a nuclear deterrent, I don't think they would see this kind of almost disrespect, like, because Tom Wilson thinks that, who's going to stop me here? These guys are bouncing off my back like flies. Because he's one of the bigger, stronger guys and has a reputation. And, I don't think people want to mess with Tom Wilson, and no one on that team, want to, the following game, he actually did have a pretty decent fight, in the following game. So I don't know. It's a tough one, but I think you're right. I think deterrence, having a big guy on your team yourself might have stopped Tom Wilson in his tracks instead of him taking on all the small guys in the Rangers. So,
yeah. Well, that's one view. I mean, if they did have a nuclear missile in the silos, so to speak, then okay, they can deal with this. But I've heard the point, I forget who made it, that this is so far beyond what Wilson did, is so far outside of what players should be expected to police themselves, that the league's got to step in, and they didn't. I don't know, Colton, thoughts on that? Should we be looking to players to police this themselves, or is this something, a guy like Wilson, can he be policed? Is it a problem bigger than that?
I think yes and no. I mean, I think it looks worse now. I think, like, obviously the role of the enforcer is pretty much done in the NHL. So I think it lets a guy like Wilson kind of be able to do these things more. I can't see back in the day with some of the really tough guys. I don't think Wilson's doing this. Or like Greg said, if he's doing it against the Flames with Lucic, he's definitely realizing that he'll have to deal with that after. Or let's say a Ryan Reeves, as opposed to, I think he fought Brendan Smith, which, no disrespect to him, but it's not nearly as worrisome having to go up against him as it is like a Lucic or a Reeves type player. So I do think, even though like the quote unquote enforcer isn't really in the game anymore, I think having a guy like Lucic, Reeves, Cassie, and what have you, I think having those guys, it really does show their value still.
Yeah. Brett, from a business standpoint, I've heard it argued that this sort of thing hurts the business of hockey, especially in the United States. Fans don't want to see it. Mothers thinking about whether to put their kids in hockey, when they see that, a lot of American moms would say, no way. Is there a place for it anymore? Do we need to? And a lot of players actually, they get into the league, they don't know how to fight anymore, right? It's not something that's happening in junior. It's becoming more of a rarity. Thoughts on the business impact of this sort of thing? Is it bad for hockey?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was kind of, that was back in the day, it was the selling point for people who didn't know much about it, was these guys on skates showing up to a boxing match. But I think it's, you watch all these documentaries now, and the few guys who've committed suicide here in the last few years, the Wade Belaks and the Derek Boogards of the world, and for me personally, you just kind of cringe watching guys fight now. Sometimes I think it's entertaining, I think, if you've been a hockey fan for most of your life. But I know even for myself, when Jujhar Khaira and Brett Ritchie fought there, you just kind of get a shiver down your spine when you saw him go down like that. And it just kind of, you flash back to all these stories you've heard of guys who are out of the NHL and are just not in good shape. So I think it's something that needs to be phased out here, and I think it eventually will, but then you run that risk now of this Tom Wilson problem, because the Rangers didn't really have anybody to sort of who would take him on or would. But then you kind of ask yourself, well, now you're just wanting to hurt some other guy because he hurt your guy. So it's kind of like almost a catch-22, really.
Yeah. Greg, some closing thoughts on that. For the sake of the business, should the league have reacted more strongly than they did?
Yeah, I think they did. I think they should have. I think, like I said before, if they would have just put even a 1 or 2 game suspension, would have probably been enough to like close the book on this. Instead, you had that crazy scene for the rematch where it was that free for all, is that the image that the NHL wants to put out there? Like, that was a game that was on NBC Sports Network, and I was watching it on Game Center Live, and after they went to break after the end of the first period, like the host was kind of throwing to commercial. He was saying, like, for those of us just joining us, we had a scene that was straight out of the movie Slapshot. Like the guy was comparing a melee on the ice to like the Slapshot movie, and it wasn't that far off, because they were like, it was almost a bench clearing brawl, and so is that good for the business of the NHL? I don't think so. So I think they should have nipped this in the bud, before all of that happened, and the big fines for the team, and the whole thing just could have been prevented. So I say not a good look for the NHL.
Yeah. Have to agree. I mean, when you're in certain parts of the United States, 10-pin bowling draws more eyeballs than NHL hockey does, and this doesn't help the competitive position of hockey in those markets. Switching gears here, I'd like to touch on Coach Darryl Sutter. I've been critical of him in articles. I question whether he was the right choice, but let's not go negative. What went right under Sutter? Under Sutter, the Flames are 12-15-1, and that makes them an unimpressive 429 hockey club. I thought they were tied for 6th with Ottawa, but Greg, you informed me they're actually looking up at Ottawa in the standings.
2 points down right now.
Okay. So judging by points alone, it would be hard to say Sutter has turned things around in Cowtown, but what are your thoughts, guys, on some of the bright spots, some high marks that we can give them? Colton, if you had to name a few bright spots for him, what would they be?
Well, I think the main one is I guess 2, actually. I think he brings a lot of accountability. I think that was kind of the main thing coming in, was that he'd be able to, the hope was he'd be able to straighten them out and get them on track to go on a playoff run. Obviously, we know now that's not going to happen, but I think, too, just defensive play. I think they have been able to clean up some things under him, especially aside from, I guess, that Winnipeg game. But I think for the most part, they have done a bit of a better job in that regard. But like you, I was pretty questioning of the hiring, too. But having said that, I don't think it's fair to judge yet. Just coming into this year, which is just such an odd year to begin with, I think he should get a fresh slate next season, and then we can kind of come back to this then.
Yeah. Brett, say some nice things about Darryl Sutter. What do you got?
Yeah, I think like they look a little more defensively sound than they did. And, some of those games they really came out playing fast and with pace. And so it was just kind of, visually looked better. we'll see how far his accountability tactics go. But yeah, like I think Colton's right. It's weird season, just 30 games or just under that he had, but they did have some good games where they were fairly dominant. I think 2 games under him, they held McDavid and Draisaitl completely pointless. And so I think it's just, trying to get everybody sort of on the same wavelength instead of, one night getting an unbelievable night from Jacob Markstrom and nothing from your forwards. And then the other nights, you get some offense, but not a great night from Markstrom that might cost you it. So I think, yeah, there's still some tweaks to be done, but there might be promise for next season.
Yeah. Greg, if you had to highlight a couple of bright spots for Sutter, what would they be?
Well, overall, since he's taken over the team, I have noticed a difference. I have noticed in the style of play. People talk about Sutter style, and they've really reduced like the shots against, this team. Like I remember there were some games where they were like letting like 35, 40 shots, and now they're like, even in their losses, like they're only giving up like 19, 20, 21, 20, like they're actually getting better defensively. And when I did that story on Darryl Sutter about a month ago, there was this Aeroplan members, Q&A session. One of the things he mentioned in that thing that he's looking forward to next year is that practice time. Like the schedule is so compressed this year, and there's so many games so quickly. And he said, like, I'm not getting nearly the practice that I want with these guys because there's just so much I want to implement. There's so much I want structurally to change. That he was kind of lamenting the fact that you can't practice. You have all these games and very few practices, and so I think the Flames are going to give him a do-over, like Colton said. And so next year, so this is another reason why I don't think we're going to see a big blow up of this team, because I think they want to see what Darryl Sutter can do with a full season, with full, with regular, practices and everything. So I have seen a positive change in this team, and not enough to make them a winning team. But I think I'm with the guys here. I think I'm willing to give him a shot next season and to see what he can do with a full season and a full system-wide change and see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but that was a great discussion as always. Thanks everybody for joining us this week. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Flames Faceoff. In the meantime, you can catch up on all the previous week's action every Monday morning when we come out with the Flames Weekly, and that'll give you a nice look forward at what we expect to see in the upcoming week. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can like this video, of course, on YouTube and Facebook, and be sure to share it with your friends and fellow Flames fans. And do check out some of the great hockey content that we have here at thehockeyWriters.com. Until next week, take care.